The question is, now that you understand that collectivism and individualism are both important, which one of the two do you think is more important for a functional society under freedom and enlightenment values?
I think asking which one of them is more important is the wrong question because you can't function without both. It's asking in a car, is the engine more important or the wheels? How could I answer that? If you take out the engine, the car can't go forward. If I take out the wheels, the car can't go forward. So how could I pick one, right? So I think we need both of them. Collectivism, I think many of us who dealt with religious tyranny, many of us Iranians who dealt with religious tyranny, we saw religion as collectivism. So coming out of religion, we went too radical on the other side and became radical individualist, thinking that all forms of collectivism is wrong. Some of us stayed in that radical individualism, but then some of us realized, like, no, it was the that was not the right way of doing collectivism, right? So individualism is important because every person's individual liberties, you can see that in every society, well, you have strong individual liberties, that those societies progress the most. So that is very important for the collective. Having strong individual liberties is important for the collective. It's also personally healthy to take care of yourself individually and prioritize a lot of the things that you want as an individual for yourself, but then not at the expense of being somebody who doesn't care for society and wants to see serve the society. In fact, the both of them are so interconnected because studies show that the best path to individual happiness is to serve society, right? So there's a Harvard study of happiness that tracks people's happiness it's the longest study on happiness that tracks people's happiness, and has come to the conclusion that more than wealth, more than fame, more than anything else, it is connection to people and to society and trying to help other people, like volunteering and committing to serving society. That is the greatest source of individual happiness. So serving the collective is the best path to individual happiness, which basically connects these two so well with each other. When it comes to collectivism, there's ways to do it right and there's ways to do it wrong. The best thing to understand when it comes to collective identities is that it's a great tool for teamwork, right? So as individuals, we cannot do giant projects as a society. We need to have collective identities to see each other as members of the same team working in the direction of achieving a worthy goal that we celebrate, and that collective identity helps us work with each other and cooperate with each other more. We need our individual identities, like I'm a father or I'm a nurse or I'm a mother, I'm a teacher, I'm a whatever, I'm a hiker, I'm a Dungeons and Dragons these are my hobbies. I like knitting. Okay, so these are the individual hobbies that we need, individuals identities that we need to embrace them and also celebrate them. It's good for people to celebrate their individual identities, but there are usually the other sources of collective identities. And in my opinion, and I know some people might disagree with me here, but one of the best sources of collective identity is nationalism, right? So I think historically the biggest collective identities have been ethnicity, religion, and nationalism. But nationalism it's a bit more modern. They used to be all of these three concepts used to be mixed with each other, and you can see still signs of them being mixed with each other. But I think for the modern world, nationalism is the best collective identity that puts people in the same team for them to work in the same direction. These are not the only sources of collective identity. Like people have a collective identities of being fans of certain sports team or being part of a Discord server or like being part of a community here or being parts of like the community around the YouTube channel. There's so many different collective identities, but the bigger the collective identity is, the bigger objectives we could tackle together. So a Discord, for example, server community will be able to do as big of a project as a Discord community can do. But we need collective identities that could actually connect millions of people together. And the three collective identities that have achieved that many people, connecting that many people together, is either ethnic identity, religious identity, or national identity. And I think that ethnic identity and religious, me as an atheist, might be biased against religious identity. Some of you agree disagree with that. And I think ethnic identities are not helpful except when you are being oppressed. So ethnic identity is not helpful unless that ethnic identity is being targeted and oppressed and hunted. Then in that sense, it makes sense to for you to create an ethnic identity so that you could find each other and protect each other against the threat. So for example, most ethnic identities I think makes no sense. Like me as a Persian, I think Persian ethnic identity doesn't make any sense. But I think the Jewish ethnic identity makes a lot of sense because Jews are hunted. There's a threat against the Jews, so it makes sense if you have a target on your back to use that target to unite with each other to respond to that threat. So that's why a Jewish identity, I celebrate that because it's a protective, it's a defense mechanism. But I don't, as a Persian, I don't celebrate a Persian identity. I celebrate an Iranian identity, which is a national identity, but I don't celebrate a Persian identity. Okay.
I love how all the Jews in the chat are collectively identifying with running the world. That's what we come together to do. So I think that's a very good example.
Oh yeah. Shh, be quiet. Don't say that. Don't expose yourself. Oh, by the way, somebody is disagreeing with me. There's two Iranians in the chat. One of them is Daniel is agreeing with me, but Kian is disagreeing with me, saying, Armin, celebrate both. How can you not? That's silly, Armin. Okay, let me actually respond to that. Guys, this is not me speaking against Persian. There's when you say Persian, you're referring to three different things, and I celebrate two of those three things. Okay, when we say Persian, we're talking about the Persian culture, we're talking about the Persian culture and history, we're talking about the Persian language, and then we're talking about the Persian identity. If I say I don't celebrate the Persian identity, it doesn't mean that I'm against Persian. I celebrate the Persian culture. Everything associated with the Persian culture, I celebrate that. The Persian language, I celebrate the Persian language. Okay. But when it comes to identity, I think we should unite around the Iranian identity. Uniting around the Iranian identity doesn't mean that I'm against anything, the Persian culture and the Persian history and the Persian language. Okay. So I'm actually in favor of all our ethnic culture, not the ethnic identities. I don't celebrate the Kurdish identity, but I celebrate the Kurdish culture. I celebrate the Kurdish language, but not the Kurdish identity. I think the Kurdish Iranians' identity should be focused on the Iranian identity. But the Kurdish culture and the Kurdish language, I celebrate that, but not the Kurdish identity. I think that the Kurdish Iranians should focus on their Iranian identity, and it goes the same with the Iranian Persian Iranians. They should focus on their Iranian identity. All right.
Okay, first on the response list is Sketch.
Yes, on this, I believe that you need a minarchism, is the way I would put it, a very small government that protects the individual rights within the collective of the nation, right? So you have the individual right to property, the individual right to self-defense, the individual right to speech must go over any decision of the collective, because the collective might decide to enact slavery. The collective might decide, oh, you know what? We're going to redistribute Jewish wealth and we're going to bar them from trade. Then you don't have a free market anymore, right? So that's the problem with the collective. The collective must be controlled by what I think the best model has been brought so far, the individual rights protected under the Constitution. If you don't protect those individual rights, the collective is going to overrun, and the will of the people can be manipulated. It's been done in many nations throughout history, and you will have some people gain power through some collective emergency thing that they have to deal with that they'll never let go. Real capitalism has never been tried either. There's always some ways to leverage the market by the people who are most successful. at it. What you have is some volunteerists and some extreme anarcho-capitalists thinking, no, we will just magically all get along and agree. That's not going to happen. You're going to have some people that gain a lot of power. Once they have enough power, they're going to come with guns and they're going to collectively use weapons to enforce their will, because that's just how that goes. It's as childish as the communists thinking, no, we're just going to agree to spread the wealth evenly. That never happens either. You always have some people that keep all the wealth to themselves. These are both childish interpretation of the market that doesn't take into account how humans behave. How you protect individualism is that you have to have within that collective a protection for individual rights. And usually what we have seen work is the individual right to speech, to self-defense, and property, because that protects trade. You want it to be equal for everyone. I believe that is the balance that has worked best so far. That's all I have to say.
So, this is the difference between democracy and liberalism. And when I say liberalism, guys, before people get offended here, I'm talking about classical liberalism. I'm not talking about modern leftist progressive, okay, values, okay? So this is the difference between absolute democracy and liberalism. Liberalism is a limitation on democracy. So liberalism is the idea that you need to have maximum democracy, but not absolute democracy, that the rule of the majority should be limited, especially based on individual liberties. That means that you allow society to make their decisions, make their laws, decide how they're governed, but you put some limitations on that. And there are more than individual liberties, but the main limitations are individual liberties, and those are not up for vote. And because if those are up for vote, what you're doing is you're creating not a tyranny, you're creating a tyranny of the majority on the minority. That's what you're trying to avoid, right? And the best structure that we have for liberalism is a republic. And before some monarchist Iranians here get upset with me, a constitutional monarchy is technically a republic as well, right? In Iran, when you say monarchy versus republic, when we say republic, we mean a republic without a monarchy. But a constitutional monarchy is technically also a republic. So a republic is basically a structure of government where it's democratic, but it's not absolute democracy. And it uses a mechanism either with a constitution or something that works like a constitution to limit the democracy and to limit majority rule. So liberalism is the goal, and the republic is the governmental structure that provides the limitation in the form of a constitution or something else that limits the ability for the majority to completely have their way and violate individual rights. And some countries don't have a constitution, like Israel, like the UK, but they still have other ways they have things that work like a constitution. But it's better, in my opinion, to have a constitution. So hopefully Israel one day gets one.
Okay, next to respond on this topic, we have Jose.
I understand Sketch's opinion because it mirrors my own. When you said collectivism, the first word that came to my mind was Marxist, Stalinist, Leninist, Maoist, Castronian, whatever communist system out there. The problem with all those systems is the same: man's ego. There's always a upper class. China right now has what they call the Red Princelings. They were the most loyal lieutenants of Mao, and it's multiple generations of them. I think this is Xing might be a grandson of one of them or a son of one of them that's currently in charge. Guess what? They get vacations, they get all this money, they get to travel. They have no problem feeding themselves. You haven't seen the size of them around the waist, okay? But everybody else suffers. And that's why when me and Sketch, when we think about it, that first comes to mind, okay? Nothing against anybody here that might have communistic thoughts in their head, but frankly, it's never worked anywhere on this planet. Why? Because you always got that one person that thinks they're above the law. And when that happens, everything goes by the wayside. You got to remember, I'll bring up a Cuban topic up. You got to remember, Cuba used to be one of the best fisheries in the Caribbean. Cubans don't know how to fish. There are no fishing rods. All that stuff was confiscated and trashed by the Cuban government. Because if you know how to feed yourself, you no longer need the government. Okay? That's pretty much my anger's coming up. The Cuban blood's coming up. Okay, let me calm down now. But that's really what I had to say there. I understand your point, Armin, but you need to understand there's some of us here that we don't have the Iranian influence, but we have another influence in our lives. And we look at that, we go, whoa, hold on, slow it down. That's that. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
That's good. Okay.
Never apologize for being a spicy Latino, Jose. Okay.
Only one.
Next to respond, we have Guy.
So two things. One, first of all, just to clarify, when we talk about collectivism, we're talking about being part of something that is beyond yourself. Individualism is the focus on oneself. Collectivism is going beyond that. And to the extent that's what we're talking about, we're not talking about a specific political platform. That's actually like the way to have a sense of meaning in one's life actually just is feeling like having a sense of being part of something greater than yourself, perhaps ideally working to benefit that something. It just, I think the issues we're seeing now in the West is because of the neglecting of the collectivist aspects of society and hyperfixating on individuality to the extent that people don't have kids because they look at the kids from their own like sort of looking for selfish point of view, which is like, well, I'm going to have a kid, they're going to take up a shit ton of my time and I'm going to suffer as a result. I'm going to have way less fun and so on. And as someone who has a 1-year-old, that is all true and it is fucking awesome because you get a lot more out of it in a completely different dimension that the West, I feel like Western thought has abandoned over the last, I don't know how long, which is, yes, there is the hedonistic suffering increases, but there's the sense of meaning, which is I'm connected to something greater than myself. I am making something greater than myself. And in that sense, society has to work on collectivist values in order to survive in the long term. And the other point is quickly about Israel. I actually think Israel doesn't have the mechanisms at all. And I think that was one of the reasons that the judicial situation got to where it got. Because I was for judicial reform, perhaps not in the specific way it was suggested, but the situation got to where it was so that the reform was needed for a good reason, which is there was no effective check on power in Israeli society. And like there should be, and I think Constitution is one way of doing it. 2 houses is another, but there is a problem with Israel. Israel doesn't have those mechanisms, and it created a parasite as a result.
Interesting.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Armin.
No, I was just saying that was interesting.
Okay, we are done with responses, and now we are moving back to the list. Richard Ochoa, I'm unsure of his topic. He did not answer me in the chat.
Hello, can you hear me?
I think sometimes
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear
Yeah,
you.
you hear me? All right, yeah, first off, yeah, I'm a American patriot from the West Coast.
Oh,
I'm a bit,
Wait, sorry, I forgot to make a change. Sorry, what was the topic? Let me change the ticker.
it's going to be arming the Iranian people.
Oh, okay, hold on. Arming the Iranian people. Okay. Hold on. Second, sorry. All right, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Yeah, but like I was saying,